So something that I see a lot when I see people asking for advice on nutrition, and a lot of the time, some of the responses can be things like, you should cut this out, you should cut that out, or this is bad, don't have this. And the thing is, there aren't actually really any foods that are bad. There are only really bad diets. No food really in isolation is bad for you. Okay. Now, I wouldn't obviously want to say a quick side note, medical conditions, intolerances, etc. And if you tend to have a certain trigger food maybe that, triggers a binge, then that's different. It may be beneficial for a while for you to limit consumption of that, or to cut consumption of that whilst you develop a better relationship with that food. But let's just talk in general. And, there are no real foods that you have to completely cut out. And, cutting out foods, cutting out even entire macronutrient groups in some cases, cutting out drinks, just isn't really necessary. And, if it isn't necessary, then, well, why do it? If you don't need to, why do it? And I think what summed this up really well, I was doing a bit of research the other day. I'm in quite a lot of nutrition groups, and a guy called Alan Aragon, I think, summed this up really well. If you don't know Alan Aragon, basically he's a god of nutrition. Everyone who works in nutrition, he is God. He is Mr. Nutrition. And I'm just going to read what he wrote on this comment on this thread. And he basically said, there's a consistent body of scientific evidence that rigid or all or nothing an approach is associated with a greater failure rate when it comes to weight control, as well as a higher tendency towards disordered eating. And any attempt at dietary perfection is a good recipe for backfiring and failure in the long term. Forcing the universal, strict avoidance of certain foods is simply not a strategy that is supported by the literature. And, when you think about it, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if you were to come to me and say, right, I'm going to stick you on this diet, and you have to completely cut out all the foods you enjoy, you have to be extremely restrictive, extremely strict, I would probably tell you where to stick that plan. You know what I mean? Because, let's be honest, we know that adherence is the number one factor in whether or not you will be successful long term. And, the best plan in the world, it can look amazing on paper, but if you can't stick to it, that plan sucks. And a huge, huge part of adherence is having the things that you enjoy. Okay, and it also leads into building habits, and building habits that you can maintain for the rest of your life. Because when you really look at it, losing weight is pretty easy. People don't really tend to have a problem losing weight. They tend to do it quite often and quite well. What they really struggle with is maintaining that weight loss. And a huge part of maintaining that weight loss is building habits that you can do for the rest of your life, which includes having the things that you enjoy. Now, the key is in how you do it. And I was reading Alan Aragon in this thread. He basically posted a load of literature reviews, etc. And I was reading through a couple of them. I think one of them summed them up beautifully in their last line. And the last line said, this review basically reveals that it may be beneficial for long-term goal success to occasionally be bad, as long as it is planned. And I think that is the key, planned. Because when we have these unplanned occasions, they can so easily go awry. I hear it all the time. I was doing really well, and then I went out, and this happened, and then the whole weekend went tits up. And then I said, right, I'll get back at it on a Monday, but that pushed into Tuesday. And then I finally got back on track. But then this just a vicious cycle, and this happens every month. And the people are overly restrictive, and then finally they crack, and it takes so long to get back on track. Whereas on the flip side, if you say, right, I'm going to be not overly restrictive, but I'm going to, stick to my plan. And then every now and again, you know what, I'm going to have a bit of what I enjoy. But I'm going to plan it. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to have a bit. It's going to be controlled. And I'm going to have a strategy for that occasion. And not only that, most importantly, I'm going to have a strategy to get back to what I normally do straight after this occasion. That is totally, totally different. And I think, in fact, no, I know that is extremely effective. And I mean, I see it in people that I talk to all the time as well. And I just wish people would get away from this overly restrictive, because it just doesn't work long term. Be flexible. It's adherence, and and it's been shown time and time again that just being overly restrictive just doesn't tend to work. So, but I mean, it's individual. But like I say, there are no real bad foods. There are only bad diets. So, flexible dieting seems to work great both in the short term and the long term. So that's the video for tonight, guys. Hopefully you got some value from that. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, share, etc., etc. I always appreciate interaction on the posts. Have a fantastic evening, and I shall see you on the next video.